I would say, or the worldview, which is how kind of I term it now, is those pillars of faith. And if you look, the Muslims are all agreed on the pillars of faith. They might disagree about some of the details of it and how they understand them, but those pillars of faith are firmly accepted. So if you look at the baseline, that is it. So a person who believes in these articles of faith is a believer.
And yet we go back to the earlier discussion about the woman who does all of those things and harms her neighbour, or this chap who stopped you on the road and asked about his brother defrauding his own parent.
Yeah, does that make him a kafir? Does that make him
we're not having that discussion.
Yeah, so therefore...
We're not having that discussion.
We can have the discussion. It's a theoretical discussion.
Now, be God.
Here, does it negate the Islam completely?
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to today's Unscripted episode, where we have a nice casual conversation with some very interesting people. We have two very special guests, none other than firstly our Sheikh Shaqur Rehman, who's the Sheikh. You're a bit of a, mashallah, a master of all trades. So you're in.
Come on, this is wrong.
You're part of Sabil. You're head of TARBIYAH, right? Head of TARBIYAH.
No,
is that
get it right. Islamic governance at Sabil and lead Murabbi. That's it. Those two things, nothing else.
Islamic governance at Sabil and the Murabbi.
Lead Murabbi, yeah.
Lead Murabbi, mashallah. Which means...
Parent as well.
Person of
parent of six.
Deliverer of Tarbiyah.
Mashallah.
Yeah, 6. You didn't know?
I stopped counting.
Oh, yeah, mashallah, it's a good idea.
Mashallah. And we have, of course, Usman Qureshi. He's famously known as a community leader in the Norbury area. And I won't say that you're Asim Qureshi's brother. But yeah, he's obviously, he's graced us with his presence a few times.
He was my head teacher at one point.
Mashallah.
Yeah, I used to work for him. Mashallah.
We had a great time, I think.
Mashallah. I loved that. That was one of my favourite jobs.
Alhamdulillah.
Mashallah.
Really?
Yeah. Usman just let me do whatever I wanted. Mashallah.
I don't think I had much choice.
Was this before or after Trojan Horse?
Oh,
well
years
before.
Years before Trojan
Anyway,
Horse.
we wanted to talk about Tarbiyah. This is something that, there's a new Sabil cycle that's open up for intakes, and I'm always encouraging as many people as possible to join Sabil or have some kind of Tarbiyah kind of system in their life. Yeah, and Osman, you're probably can be described as an educationalist, a background. Been a head teacher. He's probably at school at one point as well himself as a student. Shaqur.
I'm just trying to imagine that. Osman at school.
I think it was a beautiful.
That's really
it's really funny because kids always in school they look at teachers as though they've never been children. So when you tell them that stories about when you were a kid, they go, "Really?" They go, "Yes, we were small once." Then you grow older, but it's like they have this impression that we come out fully formed.
Mashallah. You say only Adam alayhi salam. After that, no, it didn't happen again.
Yeah, see, Islamic studies wasn't on point there.
Who was the head of Islamic studies then?
It wasn't me. I was teaching English, I think, at the time.
You were, that's right. Yeah. I think Ashraf was.
Sheikh Ashraf was at one point. I think, but he wasn't there at the same time I was.
No?
Ashraf, the one who refused to come on this podcast because he.
I wonder why.
Really? Oh.
Anyway,
that would be quite a reunion.
Mashallah, it would have been. It would have been.
So, first of all, Tarbiyah, is education a good translation of it?
Definitely not. Okay, especially with the modern concept of education. What we know. If I say to my kids, education, and most kids, they think about school, isn't it? The teacher walks in. They have a particular subject, curriculum, set of topics they have to go through. And that subject or those facts or whatever you want to call them,
learning objectives.
Yeah, that's all they want to impart on the child. Tarbiyah in the Islamic sense, if you think of muradafat for tarbiyah, synonyms for tarbiyah, you'll come up with things like islah. So something that corrects and refines the human being. And Islamically, it's nothing other than taking the human being from wherever they are to the highest level that human being can be. And if you look at the Islamic model, what did the Prophet ﷺ say? The reason why he was sent, لِأُتَمِّمَ مَكَارِمَ الْأَخْلَاقِ. Okay, so the meaning of akhlaq here in its most comprehensive form. So you have your akhlaq with Allah, and then you have your akhlaq with everyone else.
How would you translate akhlaq as behavior?
Your interactions with everyone else. Your interactions with Allah, your interactions with everyone else. And then you have the specifics of interactions with any parents, people, your peers, your extended family, your family, etc. So you have all of this. And when you look at the Sharia in totality, that's exactly what it's doing. It's refining the human being from all angles, internally and externally. So how could that be what we see and what is termed now as education? There might have been in the past somewhere this notion of tarbiyah that they used to refer to as education. There might have been, I don't know. But it's human beings, development of human beings. And whenever revelation was at the core of that development, you're going to find more of that. How to be a good human being.
But what do you think? Education?
I think...
I've heard some people translate it as education, but they just say education should be that.
Well, it's difficult, isn't it? I don't think I can really disagree with what the Sheikh said.
MashaAllah, that's the first, isn't it? Yeah. It's a good start.
At the moment, let's just say. We'll get there, but not at the moment. It's difficult, isn't it? Because it's never been part of the English language. Tarbiyah is something where someone's growing, right, and developing. But I don't think that, the translation of the term is that problematic if you want to use education even. Some people would even sort of go further and say, actually, I don't agree like I would with your definition of the word education. But then we go down a rabbit hole that's unnecessary.
I said what people think.
Oh, okay.
I didn't define it.
Fair enough. But I think that,
he's on his toes today.
I know. I have to be.
Is it the coffee game? Did you put something in it? Huh? Tasted too good. There must be something else in it. But I think in some ways, I know that you started off with it, but that's probably less important than really defining in the way that you did what it's trying to achieve, what its aims are, right? Rather than sort of saying, is that an accurate definition?
Yeah,
I think we could.
So tarbiyah, some people might not have, know much about it. So how would you define it right from the kind of linguistic and basic level?
And I wouldn't even bother going down that route because it's less meaningful, as Uthman was quite rightly saying. So if I tell you about the way we look at tarbiyah in Sabil, I think that would be a good way to make it real. Yeah. So in Sabil, the concept of tarbiyah or our tarbiyah model revolves around what we call the Siddiqiyya model, taken from Surah Al-Asr as the basis and inferences from that. So it revolves around these 7 dimensions that we have. Yeah. So in Surah Al-Asr, as we all know, وَالْعَصْرِ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. So the 7 dimensions here, we have Iman, okay? Then you have righteous actions, and those 2 are built on ilm, on knowledge, okay? And we're talking about Shari'i knowledge here. And then other things are included after that, but primarily Shari'i knowledge. Then you have working together, okay, the unity mindset, having that kind of perspective on things. Then you also have the akhlaq aspect, the sabr of it. You have the da'wah aspect, وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ. And then the final one are bringing it together. وتواصوا, how are you going to work together with people, comes through certain kind of communication skills or the soft skills that we talk about, managerial skills, etc. So all of that. So our tarbiyah model means developing a person in all of these 7 areas. Okay, so our model of it is that although we appreciate and we actually know, and our philosophy is that we're trying to nurture excellence in Muslims, and it's such that they're empowered to make a positive contribution, the most positive contribution to humanity at large. Okay, but our specific way of doing it is by focusing on these 7 elements.
So nurture, development. You mentioned these kinds of. This is what tarbiyah means, and tarbiyah for you, in the Sabil philosophy, is nurturing and developing people along those 7.
Towards excellence in those 7 dimensions. Yeah,
knowledge, iman, righteous action, unity mindset, dawah,
yep,
akhlaq,
yep,
and soft skill, managerial skills, time management.
Yep, that's it.
And the ability to summarize and all that kind of stuff.
All of those, all of those soft skills. We don't actually list or put an exhaustive list there.
I mean, I've seen on the poster upstairs that each one's broken into loads of kind of sub.
Yeah, if you try to break each one of these down, and you could take it with iman. Yeah, you've got, as the Prophet did when he defined iman. What is it? The 6 pillars of iman, and then each one of them has huge volumes to talk about all the underlying topics. But those are the most fundamental topics of it. So each one is like that.
But what about?
Can I ask something?
Yeah.
Sorry, is that when the participants come to Sabil, what are the mindsets that they're coming with? You're talking about mindset, okay? The way that they're thinking about themselves as Muslims in the West. Okay, are you interrogating their positions at that point and trying to see, I mean, you could, the argument could be, is that these guys already, all men and women, are coming to the Sabil actually because they already have a particular mindset. Okay, otherwise they may not come. They may not see the value in it anyway, right? So where is the value add in what you're doing in terms of where they're starting from and where they're ending up in Sabil?
Yeah, so Sabil is not ground zero. Yeah, the Sabil development program is not ground zero anyway. So there is a particular type of person who comes to Sabil. So they already have that Muslim identity, yani hubbul Islam. Yani it doesn't have to be too much more than that. It's not we're not trying to develop ulama, for instance. Yeah, although some of the brothers and sisters may well go on to become ulama and murabbin in their own rights, but it's not just for them. Okay, there is that ilmi element, but they come in with a mindset of they love Islam, they love Allah, they love His Messenger. So it's pretty much any Muslim, but they want to take their deen seriously, and they want to further refine themselves in their Islamic identity and make themselves the way we would make it easily palatable and understandable for them, the best Muslims they can be. So someone comes to Sabil wanting to become the best Muslim they can possibly become. That's the kind of person we're looking to take in, because we're not catering for the new Muslim who's just become Muslim and needs to learn from A, for instance. That's not what we're doing. Other organizations and other programs do that.
So it's quite specific in its remit. One thing that you did say is that, and sorry, I don't want to hijack your question.
No, that's good.
And the question
You can completely ignore us, man. It's not a
ignore him.
Yeah.
Oh my God, who's going to press those buttons? You said most Muslims just now. I don't know if we can record it and repeat it back to Sheikh Shaqur. But you said
I trust you. It's at this point.
At this point, that most people love Allah and love Islam. Okay, most Muslims do.
Yeah.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
What do I mean by love Allah and love Islam?
Yeah.
Okay, meaning that anyone who ascribes themselves to Islam without having the fundamental core or essence of Hubb Allah wa Hubb Rasul, they have no right to that ascription. They have no right to attribute themselves to Islam. Because without any love, by definition, you have to love Allah and His Messenger. Okay, that is the statement of La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. It necessitates love. So someone who not only just loves Allah and His Messenger, but someone who wants to take that further, that's the kind of person who comes to Sabil.
That's the Sabil that you're talking about. Yeah. We'll come back to Sabil. I'm just trying to think about, you might say, well, this is not the point of the discussion, in which case I'll stop. Right. But what I'm interested in, because I've been thinking about the idea of the Islamic mindset. What is that? Right. And it's not really just relevant for people in Sabil. Right. It's really relevant to the Muslim Ummah that we think with an Islamic mindset, right? And I mean, even, I don't know, I'm still thinking about it, there are no answers, but, is there either an Islamic mindset or not, right? Or is there some sort of spectrum of Islamic mindset, right? You've got various degrees of being Islamic, if that even exists, okay? And, when you come across a hadith like, I can't remember all of it, but it's like that, there's some people, companions, presumably approached the Prophet ﷺ. They said there's a woman who fasts and does give charity, and she stands up for the night prayer and she harms her neighbor with her tongue. Right? In the hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said, La khayra fiha. Right? In a way, from what I understand in the Arabic, that there's not an ounce of goodness in this woman. وَهِيَ فِي النَّارِ. And she's in the hellfire. Right? So that's always sort of intrigued me, how a person ostensibly, is going even beyond the obligatory acts, right? But the Prophet ﷺ effectively condemns her to the fire, or says that she's in the fire. Can we say that woman had an Islamic mindset?
Okay. It's quite interesting, the example you gave, because I was walking home from Maghrib. This is before Eid, yeah? I'm just trying to think. Was it in Dhul Hijjah? I think it was in the early days of Dhul Hijjah, yeah? So I was just walking home from Maghrib, and brother on a bike is coming the opposite way. And then he sees me and he stops me. I don't know this guy. Never seen him in my life, as far as I know. He stops me and he says to me, brother, can I ask you a question? Okay. I said, okay, go on. Go ahead. So then he says to me, I've got this brother of mine, he's older than me, he's 50 something, probably why he stopped me. It's probably old guy, let's ask him as well. So he goes, my brother is about 50 something, and he prays and he fasts and he does this stuff, and he's got a beard and his beard is white and stuff like that. But he's ripping off my mum. He's taking her pension money and doing this, and he just won't listen. He said to me, I can't fathom this. It doesn't compute to me. How can someone who prays and fasts and does this then go and do this? It doesn't make sense. This guy, he's coming from the opposite direction, and he didn't talk about prayer or anything. He said this. And it reminds, and he's straight in there, I'm thinking, deenu mu'amala. Yeah, it's akhlaq. We started off by talking about the Islamic mindset is interaction between you and Allah, and interaction with you and everyone else. And Allah has ordained certain methods for all of it. And then people are compartmentalizing this, that, and the other. So he goes to me, aren't you shocked by this? Aren't you surprised? He doesn't know I do all this work with people's problems. And I was just thinking about, this is normal, unfortunately. People compartmentalize which part of Islam they want. And that is part of this secular mindset that has crept into our thinking and our worldview as well. We're not kind of isolated from the rest of the world, and compartmentalizing the bits of our lives has become normal to us, whereas Allah doesn't allow us to do that. Yeah. يا أيها الذين آمنوا دخولوا في السلم كافة. The requisite, the demand from Allah is that you submit to everything that He has given. Whether you like it, not whether you understand it or not. That is the slave of Allah. Other than that is not truly a slave of Allah. So in the statement of the Prophet ﷺ, it makes perfect sense. Because how can you, this is from Allah and that's from Allah, how can you separate the two? It doesn't work. So, but being shocked by it, no, unfortunately, because we know about how people pick and choose what they want to do. And sometimes it's not completely a bad thing in the sense that it doesn't mean that the person doesn't love Allah and His Messenger at all. It means that they fall and prey to certain desires that they have. So for instance, a person comes in and you see when it comes to prayer, they're a bit lax. They miss certain prayers, fasting, they're a bit lax, whatever. But when it comes to the issue of riba, they'll come in and they say, no way. There's no way I'm touching this thing. This is so abhorrent. This is evil. I want my money to be halal. So they're very, very particular about that. Sometimes sisters come, for instance, and someone who doesn't have any hijab and you think doesn't look anything like any type of practice. But then when it comes to the issue of nikah, very, very particular. No, marriage has to be done like this and all of those things. So we see a lot of that, unfortunately, because that's not our deen. Our deen is complete submission to Allah.
You're talking about something, I think what you said is great. But you're talking about people like all of us, presumably here, who are not perfect, right? And despite our efforts, we're going to fall down. And we do, and that's part of turning back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and begging for His forgiveness. But I suppose I want to isolate the idea of having a particular mindset, right, as a Muslim by thinking about it as a way in which we make decisions about what we do in the world. Okay? So it's not about necessarily...
Isn't that what comes at the end of that? If you leave these imperfections to kind of fester?
I wouldn't say it's at the end. What Usman is talking about here, it is part of the TARBIYAH program, and at the beginning, really, because if you look how Surah Al-Asr starts, the last verse, the part where we take our TARBIYAH program and dimensions from, إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. Now, this dimension, the mindset, that worldview is Iman. Okay, so that comes at the beginning of tarbiyah, because if you don't have that, the rest is not going to come.
But what do you mean by that? Because you said, when you started off the discussion, pretty much, you said that those people are coming with a particular level anyway. They have general muhabba for Allah Jalla wa Ala.
I didn't say level. I mentioned they have...
Let's make an assumption. You gave some sort of indication.
Assumptions are dangerous.
You gave some sort of indication that they're coming with some sort of minimal requirement. That's the way that I understood it. Maybe that's not...
But it was more about the need, right? The hubbullah wa hubbur rasul. This is a given. This is obligation on any Muslim.
Yeah.
Then they have that desire to excel in their Islam, refine their Islam,
right,
develop in their Islam.
Right.
So that's the kind of person. It's not a kind of person who just wants to be the average Muslim and just do the fara'id and that's it. It's not that one. It's the one who wants to...
Is that blameworthy?
Excel.
The way that you just said that, is it blameworthy for a person to be just like that?
Sometimes.
Sometimes.
He was waiting for me to say something.
No, I'm interested. I genuinely am. I'm thinking about these sorts of things. So I want to hear what...
There's so much subtext in this conversation. I need to turn it down.
It was always going to be like this when you get Osman here. So
no, I'm having a conversation.
Sometimes. What I mean by sometimes is that if a person has skills and ability, like one of the anecdotal stories that I remember when I was in Egypt, what's his name? One of the mashayikh there in Egypt, actually, let me not mention his name. So he wasn't into ilm or anything, but he had a memory which was photographic, okay? And he was an engineer, Okay, so he was doing stuff like that. And then someone saw and noticed his memory and said to him, what are you doing? You need to be working for Islam. Look what you could do for Islam. And then he moved. And because of that kind of statement that was said to him, thinking about the ummah itself and thinking what he could potentially do, he went that way and excelled and became one of the prominent ones from our contemporaries, etc. So in that sense, if someone has a skill, and the similar thing happened to Shafi'i, rahimahullah ta'ala, yeah? So in that sense, if someone has those abilities, his particular obligations are different to someone who doesn't have those skills and abilities. So if you have those abilities and then you don't use them, okay, that obligation is upon you and you didn't fulfill it. But if you didn't know...
But you're talking about someone who is either, I don't know, a precocious child, or, someone who's, I don't know, got a particular talent for doing something, that's quite out of the ordinary. Are you talking about just, people who could broadly be said to be very well qualified, okay, or... I suppose let's stick with that. Okay. What sort of talent are you talking about? Can you be more specific?
And the point of your question, go back to the point of your question. What are you trying to
like that. He's good at this. Good point. Well, I suppose what I'm trying to say is that you said that some people could be blameworthy if they have a particular skill or talent or something. Right, and that they don't utilize that, okay, for khair, right? So, in fact, I gave a khutbah about this today. Ibn al-Qayyim talks about shukr, and one of the aspects of shukr is to use the ni'am, the favors that Allah Jalla wa Ala gave you, and to utilize them for a benefit, right? For the sake of Allah Jalla wa Ala. So, I understand that. Broadly, I understand what you're saying. And I'm not really, I suppose, very interested in that. Although I was just sort of following your conversation further, I suppose what I'm interested in more is that for those people who say that they're Muslims and they're devoted to God and they love the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam.
Devoted to Allah, yeah.
Sorry, devoted to Allah. What did I say?
God.
Okay, it happens, you're speaking English.
But the two are not synonymous.
Right, okay. But we'll stick with Allah. Devoted to Allah. Khuda. Khuda is acceptable or not?
Allah, yahi. Why do we have to move away from the proper name? It's like calling Salman something else, yani.
Anyway. So, I suppose what I'm trying to ask is that what is the basic... I'm still stuck on this thing about mindset, right? Because... there are a number of hadith that we know, right, where people who have just even focused on their own ibadah to the exclusion of concerning themselves, worrying about people in their community, doing any of that, some of those people have been blameworthy, right? Like, okay, I accept it's not an authentic narration from what I've read, okay, but the broad, understanding the scholars say from what I've read is sound, is that qaryah that Allah Jalla wa Ala ordered the angels to destroy, and then they said that there's a righteous man there who glorifies you and praises your name, and Allah said, begin with his destruction, right? So I'm sort of hijacking your conversation about Sabil and Tarbiyah a little bit, trying to understand or get my own question answered here to some degree about, starting from the basic point of what is an Islamic mindset and what does it obligate us as Muslims to do, regardless of our qualifications, our talents or skills. What is the baseline that we need to be looking at as Muslims? What do we need to be thinking about?
What do you mean by a mindset then? What do you mean by an underlying logic?
I understood it as... what is that worldview that we should have? Because the worldview will dictate how you look at everything you see,
right?
The reality. And therefore, it will then dictate how you interact with those things. So
is that what you mean by mindset?
Yes, I mean, I'm not sure about the words and whether they're synonymous or not, but yes, broadly, I think what Sheikh's saying is accurate.
So that's Iman then?
Yeah, that is Iman, because if you look at it, okay, now, if you believe in Allah and you believe in the articles of faith, yeah, so you've got believe in his books, believe in his angels, believe in the prophets, and Yawm al-Akhirah, then you've got Yawm al-Akhir, then you've got Al-Qadar, etc. All of these things. The way you're going to behave is going to be refined by these things.
Should be.
Yeah, right. So then the only thing that makes it more refined is your deeper conviction in these things, and less refined. And you don't have that deep conviction. You have some kind of conviction, maybe something, a soft conviction or whatever. And that can become deeper later. Okay, so the mindset, I would say, or the worldview, which is how kind of I term it now, is those pillars of faith. And if you look, the Muslims are all agreed on the pillars of faith. They might disagree about some of the details of it and how they understand them, but those pillars of faith are firmly accepted. So if you look at the baseline, that is it. So a person who believes in these articles of faith is a believer.
And yet we go back to the earlier discussion about the woman who does all of those things and harms her neighbor, or this chap who stopped you on the road and asked about his brother defrauding his own parent.
Yeah, does that make him a kafir? Does that make him
we're not having that discussion.
Yeah, so therefore...
We're not having that discussion.
We can have the discussion. It's a theoretical discussion. Now,
you can't.
Here, does it negate the Islam completely?
You're introducing that.
That's a fiqh discussion. No, look, you said...
No, I'm trying to ask, right, is that... because you came back down to Arkan al-Islam. You came back down to the 5 pillars. And I'm saying that...
Iman.
Sorry?
Arkan al-Iman.
Arkan al-Iman.
Pillars of faith, yeah.
Okay. So there's some sort of, not a contradiction, but I'm trying to understand how you're harmonizing between that hadith and others. Okay.
I'm saying instead of more conviction, where you can say that the more someone develops on a particular part of their Iman, is the more conscious they are of that thing.
Yes. The semantics of it don't really matter.
Well,
but again,
conviction kind of implies that they're not sure, or they're more certain about something being true or false, rather than actually having it affect them.
Yeah, maybe
because a person who's praying,
deeply convicted, you have Iman, which is very determined, right?
Somebody's doing
deep-rooted.
Someone's scamming their own mum.
Yeah.
Then obviously there's a naqs somewhere.
Yeah, of course. Without doubt.
They're not going to be consciously.
Remember, he was talking about a baseline.
Yeah.
So as long as a person believes, they're still Muslim, and therefore the other things they're doing are sinful acts. If they're going against the Sharia, whatever it is, are sinful acts. And then to something that is unanimously agreed upon, if you go against that and make it halal for yourself, then you would leave the realm of Iman. Then you wouldn't have the Islamic worldview at all.
I think that's pretty clear. I'm pretty clear on that anyway. I think, let me give you an example and ask you what you would think about this mindset. So you've got someone who's extremely well qualified. This person, is praying regularly, is fasting, is completing all of the obligations. Okay, but they do so from a perspective that it's really just about what they need to do. Right? And they feel a conviction. They understand that they're sinful if they don't do this sort of stuff, right? But in their day-to-day world, the only thing they're really preoccupied with, right, is securing, right, their lot in the dunya, where that could also mean, for example, that they are, there's nothing wrong with it, earning lots of money, good on you, right? But the focus is singularly, right, on the acquisition of wealth, buying properties, essentially, I see it as hoarding wealth, for example, and your goal being to pass it on to your children and to make them wealthy. Okay? Because one of the contentions that I might have, right, and I'm thinking about it. I could be thinking wrongly, and you're going to, tell me that now and later. Is that if a person, you see, even the fundamental obligations that we have of worship, right? There is a personal dimension to that worship, but actually they're all, to some extent, communal, right? So if it's stopping at the individual and never transforming into the communal, right? Then there's a problem there that I can see, that I feel, right? And that's what I'm trying to I suppose I'm trying to drive at that and sort of say, do those people have a mindset that you could call Islamic, right? Or even is it like, that famous story of Abdullah Mubarak when he's going to go to Hajj, and then he doesn't because he sees a poor woman and he gives her all of his provisions and he doesn't go on the Hajj, right? Hajj is a great faridah. It's one of the greatest act of worship, right? But he doesn't do it that time for that reason. So it's like he wasn't sort of saying, well, I could be free of all my sins, and, why should I give it to this woman that I don't know? She's just a poor woman. She's just begging. She's eating carrion off the floor. Why should I? Right? But there seemed to be something deeply communal or merciful, where his Islam is looking not just at his own salvation personally, but it's much wider than that, right? And that's what I'm trying to drive at, that can we say that a person has an Islamic mindset, if they're really not considering communal obligations?
And everything in the Quran tells you, no, the akhirah is khayrun wa abqa. Yeah? Everyone knows that. Okay. So in our tarbiyah model, that has to be the first element. Okay. So our human nature, who we are, why we're here, where we're going, that's an aqadi point right at the beginning. Okay. That is the worldview. Okay. This is, as the Prophet ﷺ said, my example is only as the traveler, who comes استظل تحت شجرة, and he takes a rest underneath the shade of a tree, ثم راح وتركها, then he leaves it and goes on his journey and continues his journey. So without having the belief in the akhirah as that main component here,
there always seems to be a detachment from the practicality of life. Okay, and some sort of theoretical way of talking about the faith, right? As though the theory sits up here, and we'll always mention a hadith, and we'll mention verses of the Quran in this very abstract way. But somehow, we tend not to talk about it in the real world. So people are sort of saying, that sounds like a very lovely thing. It's a verse of the Quran, and they're very reverential towards it. But what a practical impact it has on their life, only God knows, right? Because they can't see it.
Even if you think about our parents' generation who are back home with their families and working in the farm, etc., working in the fields, all that kind of stuff. What was their tarbiyah? They had a family unit, which clearly, and my family, if I talk about them, they had little, yet everything went back to Allah. So just the cultural aspect of it, without the detailed learning, it was, Allah will provide for us. And if Allah did this, and we have to have patience because Allah has chosen for this for us.
Dr. Yaqub, he mentioned something, he's an Ottoman historian, he mentioned something amazing. He said, our parents, they learned Islam through osmosis.
Yeah, that's what it was. So that osmosis doesn't happen now because there's a detachment. Okay, what's happened now? You're detached from those elders. So that knowledge that was honed and refined over centuries is not being given to you anymore. Rather, we have a media, the media pumping in a new culture to us, We're detached from the seniors and the past generation.
There was an elder in our community, and his relation passed away, and in Urdu I went and spoke to him, and I gave condolences. And a friend of mine came up to me. I didn't realize he was observing. He goes, bro, you did that really well. How did you know? And I sort of said, I don't know. I used to be taken by my parents, right? And then you just listen to them, and then I'm just regurgitating words that I've always heard them say. I wasn't given a manual on janaiz and ta'ziyah or something like that, and I'd read it and then I'd know what. It didn't happen like that. It was very natural, and you just sort of sit there as kids and you listen, and then you just repeat, bahut afsos hua, Allah ko jannat naseeb karna. All of these sorts of terms and words that you always hear, may Allah forgive them and grant them paradise. So I completely agree with you. But part of what you're saying, right, and this is something that I want you to tell me what your thoughts are on this. A lot of that was very organic, right? That's effectively what you're saying, right? And I'm wondering why or how you feel that, or not just you, I would say that anyone who's offering a tarbiyah model in the UK, lots of these things floating around, by the way, Sabila is one, inshallah, up there, but only one out of a number. But why are you stressing, a way of giving tarbiyah that actually isn't organic? Why are you doing that?
Who said it's not organic?
Because it's not.
Why have you come to the conclusion it's not organic?
All right, let's say what do you mean by organic? Organic, I mean in your lived experience, in your day-to-day, whatever you're doing in the world. That's
natural habitat.
Natural habitat. You're taking people away. You're secluding them from society, and then you're telling them things, and you're, creating if it's all great, there's no sort of argument. I mean, it's better than nothing anyway. Yeah, that sounded worse than I intended.
Better than nothing.
That sounded really bad.
I'm going to get a lot of hate after this. No, but no. What I mean is that from what you're saying yourself.
Yeah.
Okay. It seems as though you're doing something different, right? Or are you saying, Usman, this is way beyond what we can do now. We've just got to do the best that we can. Or maybe I've given you the answer.
Okay, so right. Taking them out of their norm is therefore a good thing. Okay, they need to get out of that norm. You can't physically you be with people like it used to happen in the past. You can't do it anymore. Right, so can you live with people? Can people give up their time, or everyone move together, synchronized to a certain place and create that model? It's very difficult to do. Right, so what can we do in this context? So if for Sabil, for instance, when we go away on those retreats, there's certain scheduled things that are going to happen in those retreats. But a lot of the learning is not the formal sessions. That's not where it's happening. A lot of the informal learning is probably greater than the formal learning. Okay, where is that informal learning? Sharing rooms with people that you don't know, who are just connected to you through Iman. Dealing with the differences that they have, which people don't want to do anymore. Going through a rigorous schedule that you're not used to. Taking yourself out of those comfort zones that you have in your normal day-to-day life. All of that is part of it. Then sitting with your murabbis, okay, and chatting about your personal life and problems and getting to know each other and making those relationships, both on a peer level and with your murabbis who are senior, etc., and even the admin team who are senior to you as well. So all of that happens, and then being busy for that time with that mindset of the akhirah, being reminded of it and living that experience. And if people come and they've never prayed Qiyam al-Layl in their lives before, and now they're doing it, they're forcing themselves to do it, and they're seeing everyone does it. Oh, okay, that works then. Oh, it's real. Oh, this is the lived reality then. And they can take that away. The adhkar, sitting, making sure you have that portion of Quran in the morning, straight after Fajr. So they see and experience that lived reality. Then talking about their personal problems and issues. And this always happens. Not only during the retreats, but the bonds that are created there continue after.
right? But look, as you know, I have some experience of what you're talking about, and I'm not critical of the enterprise itself, and I'm not really. That's not my focus. Because I'm not here. You're the guys talking about Sabil. I'm just here for my own benefit.
And we're talking about Tarbiyah.
Or Tarbiyah, sorry. Tarbiyah. So that's what I'm interested in. I'm interested, based in the community that I am, right? Because my desire would be to see a more authentic form of community. Like, I'll give you an example. After the khutbah today, a brother approached me and he was concerned about being able to find, spouses for his children. Okay. So it's interesting.
Bengali.
No, he wasn't. Very nice brother. He was talking about, the values. I have to say that, no. Talking about, genuinely. Talking about the values that he has for his family and all the rest of it. And I could completely understand his dilemma when he's saying, well, how do we find spouses, right? Because there's no more interaction in that way, right? You don't even know that. So you're walking around having to go to a matrimonial service and rely on an algorithm to basically find a suitable spouse. But again, as I was speaking to the brother, and I think we were on the same page here, there seems to be something that's changed fundamentally within our communities, right? Where tarbiyah, if that's what we're talking about, in the way that children grow up. We were talking about this even before I think we started the podcast. Lots of things have changed, right? And someone who is involved in community, I'm wondering how to reclaim that, right? And I believe that it's sort of reclaimable, redeemable, rectifiable. Islah is the word that you used, right? And I just wonder why we sort of say, well, that's not something that we can do anymore, and it's impractical, and we need to.
No, I didn't mean it to that level. I said,
I'm not saying that you did.
Completely. Now,
I'm just being provocative.
You?
No, not me.
You saying it doesn't exist, I would fundamentally disagree with that, right? So that community, that sense of community, and people who are still doing things that way that you suggested.
So that would be interesting. Sorry, by the way, that would be just to cut. I'm really sorry, right? Because I think it's interesting. I was speaking to a brother from Whitechapel Masjid who's involved with the youth activities, and he was saying to me, this was about conversation 6-7 months ago, that even in the sort of the apartments, he said, our doors are almost open and people come in and out like we were in Bangladesh, right? That doesn't happen in Southwest London.
Yeah,
right? so there is a cultural difference. I mean, here, I'm assuming, I don't know, maybe we can ask the brothers who live here. I think, relatively speaking, young people who are still sort of even early to late teens will still be able to speak in the tongue of their even grandparents, not just parents, right? In Southwest London, majal hai, that anyone speaks in the Urdu language from a Pakistani community just doesn't happen, right? So you even talked about this before. You were talking about language and culture and community and all these sorts of things, right?
Architecture is also a big part of it. It's much easier in an apartment block.
But yes, I'm sure that it is. Of course, it's much easier, right? Scattered around, absolutely.
But that kind of mixing, you talked about fragmentation of society, community. The core of that is fragmentation of the family, and the whole concept of family. That's dwindling, and part of the role of our tarbiyah is also to revive the Islamic concept of family. It's not you and your spouse and your kids. That's not family. Mm-hmm. The grandparents on both sides, your brothers and sisters, both sides, those who come from them, those children, etc., your cousins, and that big clan. Reviving that idea and the concept of real Silatul Rahim includes all of these people, including the in-laws, etc. All of those. Reviving that concept, it has to be part of the tarbiyah. This is from the akhlaq. Now, I would say it does exist more so from my experience here. I'm not trying to knock any part of London before we get into that. Yeah,
it's fine.
But in
south of the river,
East London, for instance, where we have those bonds which are tighter, there is still a lot of that. And even if you go to the other parts, if you're part of a system where the younger connected to those who are much senior. Yeah, and we joked about this when I was last in Croydon, actually. Yeah, our white beards now, etc. So we are those uncles and aunties now.
Allah.
Okay, we've become those. Yeah. So now that's our role.
Your uncles and aunties.
Everyone else understood, Salman. If you didn't, well, it's your problem.
It's the 21st century.
Salman was feeling left out. He was feeling left out. He just wanted to get to the conversation.
Yeah. So our wives, for instance, are the aunties now. Yeah. So people are looking for us to fill that gap. And that's the thing. When you are part of the tarbiyah system, there's a clear, right, these are our seniors. These are the ones we're meant to go to and ask. If we don't have anyone else, these are the ones we're meant to go to. And we're meant to go to our family because that's what we've learned. Right? You go to your family, you speak about these things, and you have outside uncle this, uncle that. It's just a change of term, murabbi. Right? That's what, in the Bengali community, they have that. The seniors are called murabbis.
Okay.
But it's kind of proportional to the, I guess, social mobility as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely going to raise this point somewhere. Might as well be now because you raised it.
Neoliberalism, like you're always writing about, mashallah.
Well, I'm not always writing about, but sort of, definitely. I think economics,
people up.
I think economics plays a massive role in this.
Yeah.
And, that's what I'm wondering how this works, right? Because you can talk about it until the cows come home. And what you're saying, I completely agree with. I don't disagree with any of that. The problem is that standing at the minbar and talking about these sorts of things, as I'm sure you do, a lot of people do.
And you.
And me.
On your Fridays.
And me, on your Fridays. I'm not sure how much currency it has given the wider economic concerns, right, which are really driving people to think very differently about themselves.
You can stem the flow.
No, I don't think it's about that either. Remember, to a complex problem, Islam doesn't bring a simple solution. Say, here's one thing.
Sure.
It's part of the package.
Right.
And the minbar has to be there. It has its role.
No, I'm not saying it shouldn't be.
And then you have all of those other parts that have to work together. So if you don't have all of the parts in place, you're not going to get the solution. You can get part of the solution, but you're never going to have it all until you have all of the facets, all of the parts of the puzzle.
And you can still implement lots of things.
And you have to. You have no choice. Allah has put upon you. Do what you can.
One brother in my area, he's like a distant relative. When he got COVID, he was in a coma for like several months. And he's really well connected with Tablighi Jamaat kind of crew. And they have their own kind of network.
Yeah, their model is a clear tarbiyah model.
Yeah. And as soon as he was in hospital, his wife was taking care of his kids. There was no day that their fridge wasn't filled up with food. People were bringing and doing shopping for them and dropping kids off at school. And he woke up like 6 months later, and everyone had been taken care of. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah.
And they had that, even though they're not related, like biologically, but they have that sense of kind of community. So it is possible to reinvent.
Yeah, and I'm going to say something which is really quite contentious, no surprise.
But before you say that,
go on.
This feeling and this action reality, you'll find it common for anyone who's in the tarbiyah model. So whether Sabil, whether
you see, that's what I'm going to
commonality.
Fine, I'm not disagreeing with that. I think that's true, but I think that you're underplaying what I believe to be is a significant issue, and I haven't really formulated my thought well enough to articulate it. But all I'll say is this, right? That there seems to be a trend that a wealthier a community becomes, right, the more fragmented. I mean, the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, I don't fear poverty for you. I fear that the wealth of this world will be placed before you as it was for those before you, and it will destroy you as it destroyed them. So what I can see is, Southwest London, arguably probably one of the wealthiest, parts of London, and this sort of slow erosion of culture, language, culture, community that I can see happening, that I'm not seeing as much over here in the east of London, right? And you're talking about, various jamaats and various people. Is it a surprise, or is it, not a surprise, is there some sort of correlation between the fact that, you're finding that you're finding society sort of mildly breaking apart where there is more wealth? And is that in line with the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ? Is that what he was speaking about? Does your preoccupation become about, wealth itself, and that you don't really see much else past?
I think that's very clear. In Surah Yunus, for instance, when Allah says, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ لَا يَرْجُونَ لِقَاءَنَا وَرَضُوا بِالْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا وَاطْمَأَنُّوا بِهَا وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ عَنْ آيَاتِنَا غَافِلُونَ أُولَٰئِكَ مَأْوَاهُمُ النَّارُ بِمَا كَانُوا يَكْسِبُونَ. Very clear. You see, these people, they live for the dunya. They don't hope in meeting Allah. So that pillar of faith, belief in the hereafter, it might be there on their tongues, okay? It's just like a fact you roll off, but it's lost its connection with the reality of the heart. So it's become very weak, that connection. So when we were talking about conviction in it, and this is what happens whenever we commit any sin, it takes away from our connection and our deep-rooted conviction in these articles of faith. So money does this to you. Right. So when Allah describes these people, what did they do? They become content and happy with the life of this world, the luxuries, the comforts. And really, something we always speak about is, as the hadith that you were mentioning, right? This is what's going to destroy us as an ummah. This will break and demolish and completely obliterate the connections you have with people, because you become self-centered.
How do you not be broke then and still be a good Muslim?
This is the whole point. Now, the Prophet ﷺ, none of this is rocket science. The Prophet ﷺ gave it to us. You don't even have to think about it. He gave it to us on a plate. This is the laughable thing. We have it all in front of us. But all the other things in life we take seriously, and we really put effort in and money into learning and upskilling and the rest of it. But when it comes to our deen, going back to that point, is that person blameworthy? Well, if they're not stopping themselves from the sins and that downward spiral by doing this, and you can't stay stagnant, right? You're either going up or you're going down, because Iman works like that. If they're not doing that, and ibadah is part of it, akhlaq is part of it, seeking knowledge and developing yourself, that's part of it. If you're not doing that, you're going down.
Yeah, but I think this is where I'm trying to. I'm contending with, not with what you're saying now, but the idea that somehow a tarbiyah program, that's almost agnostic to everything else, like economics. Like, take, for example, a younger generation. Let me give you an example, right? When I started working many years ago now, right, I was able to afford renting a 3-bedroom house, not comfortably, but I could afford it, right? I mean, people who are graduating now cannot afford to leave their parents' homes. So not where we are. There's no way they can do it. Forget about buying a house. They can't even rent a place. They can't even rent a studio flat without completely, getting rid of most of their income, right? So when you're saying that, right, it's as though, some of these very, very real concerns that the Muslim community has, right, which puts pressure on them. Because I do talk to younger people, and it's not that they're obsessed with wealth necessarily, but the economic situation is, really just making them focus, how can we get out of this? Because the idea, especially, from not broad experience, from the sort of anecdotal experience I have, is that, even when men and women are getting married now, right? Women, of a different generation to us, are sort of saying, well, we don't necessarily want to stay with in-laws. I'm not saying that's a wrong thing, right? But they don't want to. Okay, but they can't afford to move out. How does this work? right? So when these pressures are there, it's not, I'm not saying that these people have just, forgotten about God. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying there's a pressure, right? So saying that we're going to send you on a tarbiyah program doesn't alleviate the pressure.
It would though, if you, it wouldn't automatically, but it's a necessary prerequisite to have people with their heads screwed on and have some kind of cohort of tarbiyah happening, have some kind of someone who they look up to, who they can go to, and a network they can.
But you're talking about something.
Before you go into that
because one of the reasons why
back.
you can't afford rent now is because our parents' generation, our aunties, and uncles are probably landlords.
Even if you can't afford, even if you can't afford to move out.
I'm probably going to get a lot of scorn over this thing, but I don't want another generation scorning me as well. Yeah,
even if you can't rent, right? You can't. You don't have the ability to earn more money. Okay, that should not change your worldview, and that's not the be all and end all. Living outside of your parents' hole is not the be all and end all of life. That's just something in life. That could be. The family has to stay together, right? There are constraints on you, just like there's constraints on you in every other direction, right? To have the right mindset about these things, because when people are in these predicaments, and this is going back to the Sabil Tarbiyah model, what we say, the way we kind of summarize it is we want the people to come out of the Tarbiyah model being able to think right, act right, no matter what. Now you think about that. If that's the model here, right, our perspective, our worldview on life is to always think in the right way, the way Allah wants us to think, whatever the situation is, then behave in the right way because of all of our priorities are in the right place, our obligations first, the recommendations second, etc. And then, no matter what the circumstances are, right? So there will always be these pressures. And you know what? The Prophet ﷺ did not fear for us, as you quoted the hadith, faqr. This is part of faqr. We're feeling it. Everyone's feeling it now, because the state of
he didn't want to see us in faqr. He said, I don't fear it for you.
I don't fear it. Right. You're going to be in it. Okay. The Prophet ﷺ, as Ibn al-Qayyim mentions as well, that dua, oh Allah, make the provision of Al-Muhammad, the family of Muhammad ﷺ, qutan, just enough to suffice them. Right. That means they don't have luxuries. And you know what? You look at the reality, these first world problems that are destroying people inside out, mentally, psychologically, everything. And you think, wow, man, I don't have any of that because I don't have that kind of wealth. Alhamdulillah. And so many times the problems I deal with, situations, I think, how can you have these problems? You've got everything you need.
One thing I noticed as well, and I've heard the Mashaykh mention this as well, that sometimes you can tell a person from a person, even if it's like a maybe well-known scholar or sheikh or something, we interact with loads of them, whether it's on the podcast or just working with them in the community or whatever, doing some event. You can kind of tell who received tarbiyah as part of a group and who was the kind of
on the road,
kind of the lone person who went off and flew away to another country and spent time
Lone Ranger.
And who can kind of, I don't know, maybe I'm reading it too much, but the person who like little things like, okay, there's a lecture and the PowerPoint's not working, some people just have a meltdown. Some people just get on with it, or the someone invited you and the hotel rooms, 1 star or something, and some be like, oh, I at least expect everyone water bottles or whatever. It's kind of,
I knew you was going to say that.
I think that tarbiyah, sometimes I see like grown older than me. I'm thinking, man, this guy should have got to Sabil, man.
So look, you see,
he's promoting Sabil more than me.
No, it's fine. I think it's a great.
I've always promoted
Sabil. I'm not. Please, but what I want to ask you is that Sabil aside, right? Sabil aside.
How can I put Sabil aside if it's in in my heart, Yakhi. I can't put it aside.
I'm asking you to give some hikmah and some guidance for people who are like us, who are just working in the community, right? Because that's, we can't wait for, until people are in their 20s or whatever it is, wherever you take your first cohort Sabil, right, to tell them those things, right? I'm interested in, and the mindset that you talked about, right, which I agree with you. I agree with everything that you said, right, about how people should...
Can someone please write that down? He agrees with everything I said. I need to use this later.
Everything you said in the last 5 minutes.
Okay.
Everything you said last 5 minutes. Let me caveat that. That's a general caveat, right? Okay. Last 5 minutes, unless I say otherwise. So what I suppose what I want to know is, how do we work within our communities to build the very sense of what you're saying more profoundly with the challenges that we have, right? Because that's where why are we waiting for the...
3 words for that.
All right.
Yeah. Essentially, how do we recreate this tarbiyah? How do we effectively give tarbiyah to those around us in our care?
Yeah.
Controlled, manufactured hardship.
Okay.
But it can't be just the hardship.
Expand.
There has to be the guidance with the hardship. Yeah?
People need to experience stress, hardship, difficulty in a safe, controlled environment with safe, controlled doses. If they don't, then they will... I forgot what they call it. The thing in biology
that thing as well, right? The safe, controlled environment. If you look at the Sahaba, they didn't have that. When Allah says, وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَنْ يَعْبُدُ اللَّهَ عَلَى حَرْفٍ فَإِنْ أَصَابَهُ خَيْرٌ اطْمَأَنَّ بِهِ وَإِنْ أَصَابَتْهُ فِتْنَةٌ انقلب على وجهه خسر الدنيا والآخرة ذلك هو الخسران المبين. That, Allah didn't give them any safety nets. This is make or break. Your iman now. You either build yourself or you
can't
break.
Go and do that to someone who's possible.
Right, this is what we do, yeah? We construct it and manufacture it and give them bits and doses, whatever. Allah chooses what He's going to do with you. In real life, Allah chooses what He's going to do. So, when you get through any trial and tribulation, problem, whatever it is, really, you need to really thank Allah. Because that was the making of you. When we look back at our lives now and we look at those moments, those were the making of us. Those moments. It wasn't the luxuries and the relaxing and the joy. No, it was those moments that we nearly broke. And then Allah kept us right there. We were right on the edge. That's make or break. Now, at those moments, we need to catch anyone in our community. We need to be aware. We need to have those relationships. When people are going through those moments, we need to be there for them. And in Sabil, what we're doing is we're giving them a go-to. But it doesn't stop there. Like for me, I'm an imam of the community, various masajid like yourself. When you walk out your door, that's what you are.
You've got a bullseye on your...
Yeah, anyone just stops you in the middle of the road and asks you whatever because they know this is one of the imams, etc. I'm going through this. Even last night, I went outside. My wife was insistent last night. She wanted some, what's it called? Some naan, yeah, from the local shop made, yeah.
Wow, look at that. So we don't have that.
So I walked out. It's just like across the road kind of thing.
In Southwest London, they have to deliver you a naan.
Don't need any of that.
4 or 5 probably.
Alhamdulillah, I'm blessed. They just walk out the house and it's across the road. So I went there, and as I'm waiting for it to be made and given to me, a brother going past in his car spots me, pulls up, gets out and says, right, I'm really happy I saw you. I need to speak to you about this.
The guy's like, here's your fresh naan. You're like...
Yeah, he gets my naan.
Can you butter it now while I'm waiting?
Exactly. So anyway, that being available, this is a ni'mah, yakhi. To be there in the time of people's need, this is such a blessing. Such a blessing. Right? We would love that for us. If we're there for other people, then maybe Allah will be there for us when we need it. And that philosophy, how do you get that? Yani a tarbiyah program, whether it's this one or that one or the other, a tarbiyah program makes you live that reality because you saw it role modeled. You were part of that process. So then you become the next part of that process.
So what do you, so sort of moving now onto Sabeel, what do you hope that these people will do? So when they're either part of Sabeel, they're graduating.
He wasn't listening, was he?
No, I am, but I just want you to spell it out in actions because when because what do you spell it in actions? Because sometimes when you're talking in this sort of very high level way, right? It sounds very nice, but what does it mean? What do you expect from your cohorts of Sabeel or your graduates of Sabeel? What do you expect them to be doing in their communities? Because effectively, you're hoping that tarbiyah then becomes widespread in the communities that they live in.
Good idea. That's a good question.
The graduates in Sabeel are not meant to be of any one particular type. The commonality that we want for all of them is to excel with all the abilities that they've been given along with the 7 dimensions that we've talked about, the Iman side, the righteous actions, so they're busy in all of that. They have the paradigm of Islam when it comes to the framework of knowledge, etc. And they have some of the details that they need for their life and the work that they're involved in. They have the akhlaq that shines through for their communities. They have that sabr. They have that zeal to make an impact on society for Allah. Okay, these are the fundamentals of it, and they want to work with others to make that impact for humanity for the sake of Allah, the biggest it can possibly be. Yeah, and then they have those other skills to actually facilitate all of that, all the soft skills that we talked about. And then because of that, they go out there with whatever skills they have in whatever field they're in, and they make things happen. They make things happen on the ground for those people that they're involved in, their communities, their families, and extending out as much as their sphere of influence.
So I suppose, just to be maybe clearer, maybe this is what you're saying, but the absence of what we're finding currently in the communities, right, in terms of that togetherness or that tarbiyah that we're experiencing, right? And you're right, you get to an uncle stage now where young people either say something or do something that sort of really ticks you off and you think, God, how rude and how whatever. So, anyway, I don't want to get into that necessarily, but what I'm asking you is there an expectation that, okay, these guys should go back and think about how to develop that tarbiyah within their own communities and how to build more authentic communities where they are? Because when you're saying about doing illustrious things, you can make a podcast, you can do all of these sorts of things, right? You could do some sort of whizzy thing on the computer, right? But when it comes to human interaction, getting people together and joining the hearts, right? Mu'allafatul qulub, right? That is at the basis. We've discussed this in this chat that we've had, this lovely chat, right? We've talked about that. There's an absence of that. So you can be fundamentally involved in lots of work and doing great things, but that could be not contributing to bringing that sense of community together where you're entrenching and building values once more.
See, that I believe they pick up by osmosis anyway, and they get it drummed into them as well, okay, in the formal sessions, but they see it. Just coming together, taking a break from your normal day-to-day rat race, and then coming together because you want something for Allah. And then all of the interactions that they're forced to have, in that controlled environment, which then expands outside of that. And yes, there's WhatsApp groups and Telegram and whatever, but there's real social events that have to happen, that continue to happen. And then that following up and monitoring and interaction with the murabbi, and then finding out about people's families, and then the families getting in touch with us, and then us knowing all of their family, etc., and things like that.
But that
becomes automatic.
Even within the Sabeel program, do you have a wider appreciation of the issues that we're discussing here, because they're fundamental, right? They're fundamental to our makeup of a Muslim community, developing the Islamic mindset, developing that sense of Iman amongst the community, sharing our values, right? Is that sort of stuff discussed broadly within the Sabil program?
It's not only discussed, it's lived, isn't it? Because, right, you have a discussion, for instance, on the relationships that you should have with your parents and your siblings and your community members, your seniors in the community, etc. Right. And then you find out, hang on, this person's got issues here because they have a certain kind of questionnaire survey type thing that they're doing. And then that they repeat it on a yearly basis to make sure they're moving forward, and the coaching sessions that they have to actually address some particular issues without it being open to anyone else.
So for
the Murabbi is doing that with someone else.
But let's just say in my community, and I know a number of young people in my community who attended the Sabil programs, right? Who's reached out to me and within my community, right? Because we have a connection anyway,
They told them not to.
Right, they told them not to. Right. That's why I was thinking to myself, there's some reason that no one's... that explains it so much. I don't know if I should ask the question now. But leave me aside. Are you connecting with community sort of heads, leaders, whatever, and saying, these are our guys who have come from Spirit. How do we continue that tarbiyah process and authentically engage them in communities? Are you having that discussion with masjid leaders, heads, community leaders, that sort of stuff? Are you doing that?
We don't have to. Because remember, we're not the ones who are going to make that happen in their communities. They are. Through the program and that whole tarbiyah system, they feel that responsibility, and all of them get out there and do what they can. And we don't expect
to help network with
we do that in terms of the whole network. So you have brothers who have graduated many years ago, etc., and everyone gets connected then. So it's a network of people who actually know and have mixed with each other and still mix with each other. And then these guys are going to go and they feel that responsibility, right? I want to do this. I want to get involved. Like, many times I have this, right? How do I get involved in this institution, this organization, this masjid, whatever it is, right? Work like this. I know this person. Go and meet him, have a conversation, take it from there. That's happening all over the place. But, to centralize it all, it's not a good thing. It's decentralized. They have that responsibility. They reach out to us when they want certain things, and we just kind of keep that conversation going all the time. And they feel that responsibility, so they're self-motivated to do those things.
Before we wrap up, I wanted to just, a few years ago, I did like a poll on our social media. How many people have someone who's monitoring their Islamic development, right? Just broadly, something very generic like that. And unsurprisingly, like the vast majority said, no one's, it's just, maybe I was at uni and I did some circles here and there and then just pushed out into the world, local mosque here and there. But it's very rare for people to say someone is my murabbi. They might have a person they like to watch online a lot, or the local imam or something, but not someone who's wary of their situation and kind of, giving them maybe some advice and a trajectory and saying, are you on track and that kind of stuff, even amongst kind of peer groups. And I can't help but kind of see this in light of the explosion of Islamic talking online. Yeah, there's lots of
Islamic talking, I like that. Islamic talking.
Like lots of Islamic sounding stuff. Yeah, and from one aspect is good, more Muslim looking like people online and YouTube and Facebook and whatnot and Twitter and Islamic sounding things and the symbols of Islam kind of, spread. But it seems like there's a crisis of tarbiyah out there. Do you agree? Especially considering how much Islam is spoken about.
Yeah, definitely. And that whole thing, the social media and everything that's available out there because of the internet, people are speaking about Islam. And then there's the whole thing about whether they have the credentials to be speaking on such a public platform. And it's so public, millions of people can access what you're saying, which can be so detrimental when you say something that's absurd or wrong or whatever. That's a sign of the times. Now, in our history, it's never been like that. You know, you had a go-to person or people. You knew who the authorities were in Islam and everything else. And those are the ones you went to. And there wasn't a crisis of authority. And things were very, very clear and structured. And Islam is like that. The framework is so solid. It doesn't change. And it's so stable. It's so balanced. The experience over 1400 years and the institutions that Islam has, they are so solid. And then people are now breaking away from that. That's our tradition. If you lose that, you've lost Islam. You really have. So that, on top of the fact that, you know, a person, when you speak, like now on a podcast, and someone's listening, okay, they take certain ideas. But what about all of those akhlaq that go along with those ideas? And all of the other stuff that comes across when you're actually with a person and you see how they live. Our mashayikh, we lived with them. We stayed with them. We traveled with them. Those opportunities are lost. And sometimes it's not the formal dars that's the greatest thing. It's the ibadah side that you were with your sheikh and you witnessed and you were with them and doing that.
Even the knowledge.
It's not, the knowledge is just
even the knowledge, you
means.
can understand so much more from the way someone explains something.
Yeah.
You know, just the tone of their voice.
If you look, the whole system, our Islamic system is not, you pick up a book and you read it and you understand it and mashallah, you're a scholar of that. No, it's never been like that. You take it from the scholars before you. That's our tradition. That's tarbiyah. Because you're not learning the ideas. You're living the reality. Through those people, you have the living role models. That's what it's meant to be. You know, if you're not, the scholars told you, if the scholar you're learning from doesn't live the reality that he's preaching, go somewhere else. Okay? That's our tradition. That's tarbiyah. We're losing that because of these platforms and this kind of Islamic talking, as you call it. Yeah? We're losing it because a speaker doesn't know who he's speaking to his audience. There's not that care and concern and intention after. It's just you're walking, do your little speech and walk away.
Yeah, I think that there's also one of the things that sort of, you know, increasingly makes me concerned is one of the things that you learn when you go is this the hierarchy as well, because it's not about knowledge, it's just about knowledge, right? It's about also knowing your place in the hierarchy, right? And when we'd go to East London, we'd travel to Reading, we'd travel to various places regularly, weekly, to study with mashayikh. Just being there in the company of learned people, right? You know, you would benefit from people. So you'd have a sheikh and you have people who were, you know, very learned and then a bit less learned and someone like me at the bottom, right? And, you know, you'd see that the people who are more learned than you had, they would respect
100%.
Right? The person of knowledge, the way that they'd phrase their questions, the way that they would, you know, you could tell that there was deference to an authority. That's the word you've been using. And the trouble that I have at the moment is that I find in a younger generation, it's really not their fault, right? Is that because of this sort of, you know, knowledge, you know, is just the only end, right? You can attach yourself to whoever you want to on the internet. But those skills, or that sort of practical way of experiencing how to live with knowledge, as you're saying, yeah, I think it's lost. And I find broadly, again, anecdotally, younger people less willing to listen to those who have more experience, more insight, you know, more knowledge about the faith anyway. And they're sort of more sure about their own position in their late teens, early 20s, when I think you're still very young. You know, and I think that's contributed to that lack of deference, you know, not being with Ahlul Ilm, not being with other people who are also studying and can pass on the tradition as well. So I think, yeah, that is a problem.
Those interactions, learning how to interact, that's definitely been lost. How can you learn to interact when you're behind a screen?
Right.
Whereas here, in all of these tarbiyah models, you're forced to live interactions.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to carry on. Kind of lost track of time. Need to wrap up now, unfortunately. But before we wrap up, can you just tell people how they can sign up to the next? We've been kind of like old fogies saying back in my day, now kids these days, and now we've got an opportunity to undo some of that damage, that crisis of tarbiyah, and enroll into a type of tarbiyah program. Alhamdulillah, Sabil. Always recommending people go out. We'll put the link on the screen and stuff, but if you want to just let people know what the dates and stuff are that they need to.
The moment, first let me advocate Sabil, and let me make something a bit more comprehensive as well. So Sabil, we've got a new cohort starting in September with, I think the induction is probably in August sometime, late August. So just go onto the website, just search Sabil Development Program, and you'll find it. And then it's the new cohort is the SDP 9. So definitely go to do that, because it's a structured program which has all the things that we were talking about in it and more. We haven't gone into the details, so you can see all the details there. But at the very least, even if you want to sign up to Sabil, make sure that you are on any Islamic Tarbiyah program. No matter how old or young you are, you need that. Because right now we're being pumped with anti-Islam 24/7. If we don't get pumped with Islam, we're just going to fall prey to anti-Islam. It's happening to us whether we realize it or not. So the main message is Islamic tarbiyah is crucial to our lives. Not our lives here, our real lives, our eternal lives in the hereafter. So if you're not part of a tarbiyah program, but you have seniors above you and there's a structure and there's a clear way of moving forward in progression in your Islam, then what you're actually doing is going backwards. So that's the key message I would like people to take away.
And that's for brothers and sisters, right?
Yep, brothers and sisters, because how can we leave our sisters?
Obviously.
Separate, and we have family ones as well.
Really progressive ones.
I don't know why you hesitated there for a moment.
It was like, I was shocked. How can you think that it's not for sisters? It has to be for sisters.
All right, so check out, I think it's sabil.org/XL, I think.
Yeah, even your daughters should be able to sign up as well.
Inshallah.
The new cohort for brothers and sisters is coming up in August.
Inshallah.
Inductions and things are in August. And the actual retreats in September, October.
In November or something. Yes.
There's one in November. I think that's the brothers one. I think the sisters one is earlier. Can't remember now.
Okay. And Usman Bhai, Jazakallah khair for coming. I was telling Mahmoud that we need to get Usman down generally anyway, just for his own a chat with him. Lots of stuff to discuss with you. Maybe bring on Ustad Kashf as well.
Yeah.
But Jazakallah khair for coming.
Jazakallah khair.
Shaqur. And Jazakallah khairan, you at home for watching. If you like this podcast, give a like and share. Remember to get involved in the comments and check out sabil.org/XL. I'm going to be really impressed myself if that turns out to be the right URL. But thanks for watching, and until next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.